Fired for complaining about her boss on her Facebook page, but now the National Labor Relations Board has jumped in, saying that the firing may have been illegal. So are you protected if you complain about your boss on social networking sites? Paul Callan, professor of media law at Seton Hall University, is with us this morning. This is a big one because this is the first time that the NLRB has ever jumped into a fight like this. It's
a very big one, John, and it's just another example of these social networking networks getting into all aspects of American life. We've seen it with college students. Now we're seeing it with labor issues.
So what the NLRB is basically saying is your Facebook page is kind of like the water cooler at work, and people gather around the water cooler at work and they say, well, this is wrong. You know, they're talking about working conditions, and maybe that involves dissing your boss as well. And the Labor Relations Board is saying Facebook would be just like a water cooler as long as there's a conversation going on.
That's right. And it's really interesting because traditionally American companies, and as a matter of fact, most workers probably look in their manuals and they will see they are prohibited from making postings on Facebook or other social networking sites, violation of company policy. You can't wear a company outfit and post a picture. And these rules have been thought to be sacred in the past. Now the LRB says if you are discussing work conditions on Facebook and other workers are participating, it's legal conduct and it can't be prohibited.
But that's the key, is it? Other workers, co-workers have to be participating. It's not like you could just have a blog where you ranted about something. It has to be a conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of a technical rule, but the rule is basically that the workers have to be engaged in what's called concerted activity, and that means a number of them have to be discussing work conditions. Now, in the case here involving this ambulance service, the woman made a posting critical of a supervisor, and then other workers chimed in also attacking the supervisor. She was then fired for disloyal conduct and violating the Facebook policy, and the NLRB came in and said, this is protected activity. But I think you have to remember here, this is the first part of the situation. Early stages, there's a whole appellate process. I don't know if ultimately the courts will uphold this ruling. It's going to be very controversial.
Companies across America, of course, are wrestling with social media and the policies that they have in place and what people can and cannot do. For companies that have a blanket policy, as this ambulance company did, that said you cannot post anything about the place that you work, particularly in a derogatory fashion, on a social networking site, does that render that policy now either ineffective or just basically illegal?
Well, any company that has such a policy has to look at it and weigh whether, and they're going to have to consult with their attorneys about this, whether this rule is going to be applied nationwide. So they're going to look at this policy. But I think companies are really worried about this because, remember, if a worker criticizes a company on a Facebook site, and let's say they have 500 friends on Facebook, it's not only going to the fellow workers, it's going to the 500 friends. And I think when lawyers start arguing about this, they're going to say, you know, this is really not about workplace conditions. This is about a company's entire national reputation, and the NLRB should take a different look at it. So it's going to be a fierce battle in the courts, I think.
But the Labor Relations Board also said, even if you're making a disparaging or discriminatory comment about the company, that may be protected.
Well, in this ruling, they did say that because the woman who worked for the ambulance service described her supervisor as a 17, which is a psychiatric patient, okay? That's what they use.
In the parlance of the ambulance world.
Exactly. So she was saying he's a psycho, her supervisor. That would be disparaging normally, and one would wonder whether that would be protected. That's not really criticizing work conditions. It's really attacking and libeling a supervisor. But the board here said because he was a supervisor, she did have the right to criticize.
Interesting. I was wondering where the line is drawn. If you're posting things online, do they have to be specifically about working conditions, or you can just say my supervisor or my boss Joe is a real jerk and get away with it?
Well, the first thing I would say to workers out there, and union workers in particular, is be very careful about this, because even though you might have a legal right to post, you might not advance very quickly in the job if you're attacking your supervisor online. And you can't attack them for personal qualities outside of the workplace. As long as you focus on inside, you're okay.
You just raised one point. We were talking about this off camera, but we've neglected to mention who can and who cannot do this.
Yeah, you got to be very careful about this. This only applies to unionized workers and workers who are capable of joining a union. So, for instance, people who are professionals, defined as professionals, a lot of white-collar workers, would not apply to them. If you have a supervisory role in your company, it does not apply to you, so don't criticize the boss higher on the food chain there. You might get fired legitimately. So be very careful about who you criticize on Facebook.
So the bottom line here is, if you're going to write something derogatory about the place that you work on your social networking page, you want to talk to Paul before you do. Thanks,
Now,
Paul.
that's a great idea, John. Thank you very much.